Well, thank you all for being here. I'm George Dennison. As you know, I get to serve as president of the University of Montana, and this is another in the session, or series of sessions, that the commissioner and the regents have been holding around the state that they refer to as listening sessions, the purpose of which is to provide an opportunity and a forum for people to raise issues and ask questions, and then to learn a little bit about what the Montana University system has been doing for the last couple of years and the direction that it would like to go in the next couple of years. And the commissioner will have a few words to say by way of explanation about that, so I appreciate your all being here. And by all means, once it gets started, do not be reluctant to ask questions and to raise whatever issues you want. And secondly, since there are some reporters in the group, the request is that you not only indicate your name, but spell it, if you would, please. Okay? And with that, I think I'll ask the commissioner then to make a few statements about where we are and why we are.
Thank you. Can everyone hear us okay? Can you hear us back there? Great. This is a little unusual for us. We've been on a tour around the state a couple days each week since late August, and most of them have been very informal. I feel like I'm at a Secretary of State press conference or something here. So even though it feels more formal, we want you to think conversational and just sort of wave or jump in, because we don't intend for it to be just one-sided at all. I would like to introduce, also up here with me is Clay Christian, who is a member of the Board of Regents. And I think most of you know that in Montana, the Board of Regents is a group of 7 individuals, 6 of whom are appointed for 7-year terms. So it really has a very stable, slow turnover, which creates, I think wisely on the part of the constitutional framers in the early 70s, a very stable, thoughtful, long-term board. And they are my boss, and they're the ones who hire the commissioner. And so I'll give Clay a really rosy introduction. He's one of my bosses. He is based here in Missoula. It's, of course, not always that there is a regent that's local to Missoula, so that's nice for the University of Montana and this whole region. He has a special understanding of it. Also up here is Tyler Trevor, and Tyler is Associate Commissioner for Policy and Planning. Formerly was Director of Institutional Research in our office, and before that had that position for the state of Nevada. Has a lot of great experience and information about sort of higher education issues nationally, but especially in the West. So he's a great resource. And he didn't take a chair up here, but gone on most of the tours with me is Mick Robinson, Associate Commissioner for Finance and Administration. Mick took the long tours out to Miles City and Glendive and Lame Deer. He's probably going to get the combat medal. Not you, Tyler. You're just coming to the close ones. So, but what we're finding, a reporter just asked me, you know, what are some themes, and we'll be happy to talk about those. But what we really want to hear a little bit is to, you know, what are the themes here in Western Montana, especially right now here on campus and in Missoula. And as I mentioned to a group this morning, the idea, I guess, for traveling around like this came toward the end of the legislative session last year, when a couple of legislators said to me, well, the college affordability cap, the plan to have a tuition freeze, was unprecedented, and it's hard for any of us to argue that that is not a good thing. But there may have been other needs, or there may be higher or lower. It just seemed by the time it got to the legislature in January that it was already in concrete. And when do we, the public, when do we legislators get more of a voice in what the presidents and the regents and the commissioner and deans and important people think are the priorities to ask for funding and for support from the people of the state of Montana? And I sort of scratched my head and I thought that's a really good point. But to do that, I mean, it was really kind of, I had to take a deep breath, because in May, to have a conversation and really think about what that meant was just 3 months later hitting the road after a long legislative session, and a special session wasn't sort of exactly the mood I was in at that moment. But what it really meant was, and here we are, is that we need to hear from people, from our people, our community. And that's, people say Montana is a small town with long streets. We all are the community, and to hear from you in a way that might have an impact in a way that we can maybe be a voice to the policymakers, to one of these 7 people, one of whom may have a cold, I'm not sure, but
Drink water, right?
okay, that decide what are the priorities, and then they present them to the governor, and we have our first meetings. My staff and I, Mick and I, and a few of us will be meeting with governor's staff as early as January, February, March. And a lot of the heavy lifting gets done by spring and certainly by early summer. And if you think about it, for those of you who follow the political process, that is before we know who even, half of the House of Representatives will be. The election won't be until a year from now. And yet, many of the decisions that get into print, into the budget book, are made by September. And the board, essentially, we've presented to them some ideas by January and March from our campuses, and they affirm them or ratify them in May. So part of what we're here to hear is, gee, we think this issue is important, or that issue is important, or whatever. But to start that conversation, for any of you who have not visited, and I've never looked to see how many hits there are on the Montana University System website. I have a feeling that it's not quite like YouTube or anything, but you could get on the website, mus.edu, and check out the strategic plan. It is fairly short. It's 10 pages of 3 overarching goals, and they are on the just a little handout. This is just a little Reader's Digest version relating to that plan that the board adopted in the last couple years, but that they always consider it a work in progress, and they and we are always interested in, what you can't put equal emphasis on all goals at all times. So when we hear from you, it may affect which goals, just like last time, the goal toward affordability rose to the top, to the point that some of the other very worthy goals just did not get as much emphasis. But at the bottom of page 2, those 3 goals are still the overarching ones until when, if we hear differently from enough people. Number 1 being access and affordability for Montana citizens to be able to access post-secondary education, go to college if they're qualified to do so. And that is really, it's a goal across the country too. This awareness that countries like India and Ireland are figuring out how to get more of their people into post-secondary education for some sort of meaningful, significant credential. In all cases, it might not be a baccalaureate degree, but a degree or the specialized training that will enable them to live fulfilling lives, be good citizens, and earn a family livable wage. That's what this access and affordability is all about. The second one, economic development, has always been somewhere in the board's goals over the years, and that is to make sure that we play our role of the university system, and education is just a huge part of that in every state and in every society now. The more educated the populace, the more young people you attract, the more young families you attract to that state or to that region, and the more scientists and entrepreneurs that you attract. So we know we play a strong role there, and we're doing it deliberately and trying to do it better. And the third overarching goal is to do all this and to do it efficiently and effectively. So that presumes that we will not compromise quality. The board is firm about that. It has been for years. Quality is a little bit like beauty. It's sometimes, when it comes to colleges and universities, it's in the eye of the beholder. But nevertheless, there are ways that we can and try and do measure at least the proxies for quality and the proxies for efficiency, how to be efficient and effective at what we do. So given those, what the board will be doing is giving directions to me and my staff, to President Dennison and his staff, and the other campus executives around the state to say, think about what it is Western Montana, and particularly, you know, the University of Montana or the broader Missoula area may need from higher education that would synchronize with these goals. What would enhance quality? Fundamentally, it's all about students. What would enhance quality and opportunity and for students in the regions in which they're learning and studying? So that is sort of to set the table, and then to have all of you, we're supposed to listen, and we'd like to listen, and hear comments. We're taking notes, and we'll synthesize, easy for me to say, synthesize. We'll put these together. Yeah. Well, and share them with the regents at the November meeting and the January meeting. It'll make us more informed as we provide advice to them. So with that, I will, Clay, do you want to add to that as we get going?
I think that's a great introduction.
You do?
I do.
Okay. Well, I expect to see that in my evaluation next spring. Good. Okay, well, so it'll be your turn, and one of the things, again, that President Dennison pointed out, but a few of you have come in, if you want to stand up and talk or sit and talk, that's great. If it turns out we need to share a mic, we'll have Mick or someone run it around to you. But the reporting students, there are several here from a reporting class, and they've asked if you would identify yourself and spell your name. They would appreciate that. So if you'd be willing to do that. By the way, my last name is Stearns, and Sheila is Sheila. So there, I've set the example. Okay, before I sit down, I'm going to have one of you go first. Oh, Mark, right?
Yep.
Okay, good. I thought I might have to wait for a while on my feet. Thanks.
No. Good afternoon. My name is Mark with a K, Loparco, Loparco. And the thing that I would like to bring forward is asking you to consider what can be done for staff wages, especially entry-level staff wages. I hire 72 full-time employees in my department. Over the past year, I have seen the applicant pools shrink, and in some cases, they're non-existent. I've had repeated searches with no applicants, repeated searches with only internal applicants, and I believe that if you are committed to goals 2 and 3 listed here, that this is something that is critically tied to the ability of the institution to provide the level of service and the quality standards that we have. It's getting very difficult to do this with staff wages at the level they are. And I think you heard this morning about a dishwasher who's making $11 an hour. I want you to know that that same dishwasher could come over and cook in my board plan dining room for 2,000 people and make $8.50 an hour. So it's something that is an important issue. It's critical. I think it's at a critical tipping point, and I would challenge you to try to come up with ways to address that. Thank you.
I can comment on that. That's a great question, and certainly something that is. Hello? I appreciate the comments. That's something that we're looking at very closely. I do chair staff and comp. That has been raised throughout Montana. Certainly the Bozeman campus and here seem to be sort of the epicenters of that issue. Not that a study solves too many problems, but we did commission the recruitment and retention task force, and they presented at our last meeting in Billings a report that has some great suggestions in it. I think where the board went from there is it was presented to the entire board, and what we're asking at this point from the OCHI staff and some of the administration is to try to start carving out of that report some pieces that we could address immediately. And you know, the hourly wage that you're talking about is a very prominent problem, and compression and aversion are becoming significant issues for not only how do we hire, but how do we keep those that are employed here enthused about that. At the root of the problem, which is probably a good problem, is 2% unemployment or whatever it is across the state, and I think all businesses are facing that same situation. But we as an institution definitely need to deal with that, and I think there are some steps underway. I don't know resource-wise if we will solve them all tomorrow. I think there's 10 bullet points sort of on that report, and our first course of business, and hopefully one we'll return to in November, will be, all right, what are some areas of this report that we can start making progress? But it is definitely not going unnoticed, and is in front of the board and something that we are going to try to work on.
Just a moment, if I could, while you're taking that to him, to also comment, the working title of this is Investing in Montana's Competitive Future. And you know, folks, one of the things we need is when those legislators are campaigning next fall, all of them are hitting the doorsteps. They're ringing your doorbells, and they're not necessarily hearing about how hard it is to be competitive for employees, good employees. They know it in their own businesses. We're hearing that in the private sector, and I think that they need to hear that it's across the board. It's in the long-term care facilities, it's within the university system, and to be competitive, we need for our legislators to understand that as well when the pay plan is put together.
Yes, my name is David Werner, W-E-R-N-E-R. And first of all, I'd like to thank you all for conducting these sessions around the state. I think they're very helpful. What I'd like to address is what I consider a crucial issue for the higher education system in Montana, and that's in the 2-year post-secondary education area in Montana. And I believe in the future years that you're going to be facing eventually a Byzantine structure, especially regarding 2-year post-secondary education. If some planning isn't done now, and maybe you have, but I'm going to address a few issues in the past. And I've got a lot of notes here, but I think I need to skip over some of them because I think most of you are already aware of them. But for example, from my way of thinking, well, first of all, let me just simply say that I think there ought to be a separate system for the 4-year graduate research institutions and a separate system for the 2-year post-secondary systems. And I would like to propose that the Board of Regents seriously consider developing a commissioner of community colleges and occupational education, which would be on the same level as the commissioner of higher education. That would remove an administrative level between the deans of the colleges of technology, and would also put someone at the state level on a day-to-day relationship with the 2-year programs and other post-secondary programs in the state. I know that this kind of raises an old issue, which I understand at one time there was the 2-university model, and then there was the 2-year system model. And so this is what I'm talking about, is seriously considering a 2-year system model. And probably you're all aware of how other states have handled this, and I'm just going to mention that the state of Colorado, for example, has a separate system at the state level for community colleges and vocational education. And the state of Wyoming also has a separate community college commission. And these are only 2 states that I know of, and I'm sure that the pattern, other states, many other states have separated these 2 missions in a higher education system. What I'm also advocating is that the comprehensive community college be the institution of choice to deliver 2-year programs in Montana, that you consider that as your alternative to the 4-year graduate research system. One thing I want to address also is a concept called mission drift, which I think was mentioned in legal services study called A Historical Perspective on 2-Year Post-Secondary Education in Montana. Where do we go from here? And I'm sure you're all aware of that. I don't know what to put down first, the microphone or one more. First of all, on page 5, find it. I want to quote, is it E.D. McClure? Eddie McClure, okay. On page 5 under mission, in the section on the colleges of technology, and I quote, after the restructuring of the university system in 1994 and 1995, the colleges of technology began to focus on offering a 2-year curriculum with credits acceptable to all units of the university system. The mission of the colleges of technology has become more closely aligned with that of the community colleges. In the last sentence of that paragraph about the colleges of technology, she says they appear to be moving toward becoming more similar to the 2-year community colleges. And later on, under the tribal community college section, I just want to point out in this concept of mission drift that the Salish Kootenai College now, which started as a community college, is now offering baccalaureate degree programs. So what I'm saying here is that regardless of the basic level that you start a 2-year post-secondary program, that there's going to be pressure over time to be adding programs to eventually perhaps becoming a community college. And the thought has occurred to me, however, that many of these areas, and I'm thinking about the Central Montana Education Center in Lewistown, that they are starting out, basically offering nursing and medical programs, and that's working out, but now they're wanting to start adding industrial arts programs and also start adding adult basic education programs. And so these things get started, which is for the good for the communities. And the only thing that I can think of would be that maybe many of these communities may not want a full-fledged community college, which what I mean, and by the way, I believe a comprehensive community college is essential. But some of these people, I think, may be thinking more of an institution like a community college, but without transfer programs. Now, I don't know. It may be that as, for example, the center in Lewistown, as it grows and is adding these programs, it may become a question whether they want to add 2-year transfer programs, which may be more costly than the people in the district want. Now, I don't know, I'm just throwing that out, but you need to look at some of these different ways that 2-year and post-secondary institutions seem to morph, and they will morph. I have a little more. Is that okay?
We only have an hour, and I really would ask you to hurry up so that others
okay,
have a chance.
I'm through most of it, and the only other thing that I want to comment on is I know there's a controversy in the Bitterroot where people are trying to develop a Bitterroot Valley Community College, and it appears that, and there's some history behind this, and it appears that over the years up previous to 2006 that the University of Montana had an opportunity to open post-secondary programs in the Bitterroot, and they didn't do it, and that's why in the spring of 2006 people got together to do it themselves and are offering and wanting to develop, and they already have a community college district and a board of trustees. And now, however, the university here in Missoula wants to open up a so-called higher education center, which in effect is basically offering College of Technology courses and is basically then competing with the kinds of courses that a community college would offer. And so this is a great concern of mine, and I think you people need to keep in mind all these different kinds of hybrids, such as higher education centers. And I'll just close with my definition of a higher education center. And the direction for the Bitterroot would be to establish a community college first, offer lower division transfer courses. Then the university comes in with a higher education center that offers upper division, graduate, and maybe even research. So people in the Bitterroot can, start from basically adult basic education and obtain a graduate degree without leaving the Bitterroot. Thank you.
Is it Dave? Is that right? Did I get your first
Yes.
name correct? Dave, thank you. We've received a letter from you as well, and we know how much thought and interest you have put into this. I would like to point out, I'm sure you saw the slide, that one of the real high priorities for the board and the governor for several years has been to sort of increase enrollment in two-year education across the state. And we do have quite a variety of approaches in the state, and the board is, and my office and the campuses are quite aware of them and are looking to strengthen those so that it's part of that access and affordability initiative, because generally it is the most cost-effective, accessible way for the citizens of Montana to access education. One of our favorite spots, and Mick was with me on this listening tour, was in Lewistown. Was it just a week ago? I think a week ago yesterday. At what they call EOCM, Educational Opportunities for Central Montana. And it's an arm of MSU Northern. And they work together very collaboratively and assist each other. It's a really terrific example of a community and leadership and volunteers working together with an adjacent four-year institution. And I think it's a great example. They had kind of a celebration, I think, last Friday. And really deserve a pat in the back from the people of the state of Montana and their region especially. So you made a lot of good points. I've read Eddie's paper, in fact, helped her with parts of it. So I think the board is quite attuned to the complexity of the issues you raise and are very interested and concerned about them.
I always come in late, so I get in trouble here. But my name is Bill Wussner, W-O-E-S-S-N-E-R. I'm chair of the Department of Geosciences here. Thanks for having this session to sort of hear things. I wanted to just tell you that I'm very supportive, and my colleagues and I are very supportive of your efforts to try to move into the graduate education level at a higher speed and at a deeper kind of process. One of the concerns that we all have is that, we need to then have our legislature actually support that, and that's your jobs partly, and we know that's a difficult one sometimes. But when we sit here and see $1 billion sitting off not being invested in the state, we have a great place where it could be invested, and certainly the University of Montana is one of those places. And we think we could certainly not only benefit from that, but benefit the state very much from that, as you suggest, an economic investment. So I certainly want to tell you that I'm very supportive of that. And I know that as you are evaluating this and making your plans and forming committees to meet on this, that the other concern certainly is that, we've grown tremendously under President Dennison in the last 15 plus years, as he would say, or something like that. And where we are is that we're in a position where it's not just hire more faculty and and get more graduate students. That's not going to actually develop the state's economy in the right way, because we need in underpinning sort of structure. Some of it you heard about staff support and staff salaries and number of staff in places, and that's just partly because we've grown at the rate that we've grown at. So I wanted to just reiterate that it's not just staff, but it's facilities, it's space. You can't grow a big research and graduate program without significantly more space, even with the number of faculty that we have. So those are the kind of concerns that we see and challenges that you're going to have to face. Again, we're supportive of, I am supportive, my faculty supportive of what you're doing and what the direction we're going in. We want to know how we can help, but we also realize that as we're making that journey, that we need a major investment in infrastructure sort of to underpin this next step that we're making. So we hope you consider that.
I think we're very aligned with that. You're right on track in terms of the economic impact, and that is a message that I think all of us in this room and throughout the various institutions need to carry. We visited about this morning, but with over $1 billion of spending, that it's going to have about $200 million of state funds in there, and that's a tremendous economic engine for the state and for all of the economy. And so now we share that, and yeah, it will be a journey to get there, but the messages that I think we need to continue to champion is both the economic impact and also the ability to retain higher degrees in the state, which has always been sort of an issue of state funds, is well supported by it as well. So I think it's something that has broad support by the board at this point.
Just one quick comment on that, Bill. It's such a good point, and by the way, it's nice to see you again. The legislators are always interested when Bill Johnston, there's Bill, when Bill and his counterparts at Tech and at MSU bring over examples of research, and some of yours have been the most interesting and compelling over the years. But generally, when you just say graduate education, especially to fairly new legislators, they don't always readily, interpret that as, as an investment. And so we will be calling on you and others, and your neighbors, to help convey that message that it is a terrific investment. Graduate students and where they live and work around the country, whether it's in the triangle around Chapel Hill in North Carolina, wherever it is, that a state that has taken a fairly impoverished area and invested in research has had it repaid to them tenfold and perhaps 100-fold. But that is a message sometimes hard to convey, so we'll be relying on, and for you and I, Bill, to make that message to legislators, or Bill Johnston, or George, who has a wonderfully compelling presentation on that very subject. It convinced the regents this last summer at their planning session to make it a higher priority. Because people think, oh my gosh, you have to build another building, and you say, yeah, and it needs a lot of labs in it, and they say, it's a question mark. So it's a hard case to make, but if we can make it, there are actually very few things that can benefit Montana as much. No students are more likely to stay in the state after they graduate than the students who've gotten their master's and doctoral degrees, that higher than baccalaureate, and in some cases even the two-year graduates. And then I see you, I'm sorry, right after here? What? How about next?
Patrick Weaselhead, Patrick with a K and Weaselhead, 2 words, W-E-I-S-E-L-H-E-A-D. I've been back and forth at the university for several years, and diversity has always been one of those issues we're confronted with. And I know that a lot of times we have a recruitment issue of hiring people of color, and sometimes we can't do that because we can't afford them. And I often wonder how the institution will work out a situation where they can recruit people of color and do something different so that it doesn't override what's going on in the system, but to bring more for diversity to this institution and to institutions across the state of Montana. The second one is I hope there's a strategic plan that includes tribal colleges, because as this gentleman said, Dave, I think is your name, that they are now forming four-year institutions, and they're trying to beef up their two-year institutions, and the dual enrollment and the articulation agreements with the 4 years is becoming clearer and clearer that it's going to be happening.
I think President Dennison certainly could comment on the earnest efforts and many times successful efforts, not always to recruit diverse faculty to the University of Montana campus.
Well, it is an effort that has gone forward not only in the University of Montana campuses, but also at Montana State. And as you know, Patrick, and I think everybody else knows, everybody in the world is recruiting or seeking to recruit people who come from diverse backgrounds, minorities particularly. And so, as you say, there's always a bidder's market there. We've been relatively successful in a minor way over the last few years by trying as much as we can to meet what the market is, but that there's a limited amount of money that's available. I think probably what would be more successful over time is the collaborative effort with the tribal schools to assist them in growing your own, so to speak. Prepare the people who then will want to stay because that's where they come from. And most recently, with the assistance of the Sloan Foundation, what we have is a series of one laboratory on campus, which provides an opportunity for students who come from the tribal schools particularly to gain that experience and familiarity with laboratory science, and then they can go on for a PhD and perhaps stay there and work here as well, back and forth. That's probably going to have greater potential for us in Montana than saying we're going to scare up the money in order to hire a lot of people who really don't want to be here in the first place. So if we can take advantage of the people who are here, I think we have an opportunity to be much more responsive.
And the second part of yours to plan with and cooperate with the tribal colleges. The presidents of Little Bighorn and Chief Dull Knife were part of the Regents meeting at Miles City in the spring. We held our meetings at times on their campuses. We work very closely together and are always trying to work even more closely together. I have visited all of them and try to get around frequently to make sure that we're staying in close contact to make sure if we can work together and save resources and help each other that we do so. So it's a good point, Patrick, but it's always good to have a reminder. And now, back there. What's his first name? Michelle.
Thank you. My name is Michael Valentine, like Saint Valentine, the name, and I teach in foreign languages. Many among us are apprehensive about what's going on, of course, all over the world. It's socio-political. That is to say, the tension between education as educating, critical education, knowledge, and education as training, vocational training, professional school. Do you see first, do you have a vision? I'm sure you have a vision, but does your vision is aware of that tension, or do you go along with what's going on all over the world? Or do you think Montana should have a different approach? For instance, professional and vocational school have a lot of money from private industry. Liberal arts, so to use the traditional name, doesn't have much funding. Look at the building, look at the programs, etc. There's an erosion. So do you want a working force which is well-trained but ignorant, excuse me, I mean, quote unquote, or do you want a workforce which is trained and educated and able to perhaps be less politically manageable? I don't know, I'm just throwing that. Thank you.
Michael or Michelle, which is it? We absolutely want what you said the last there. We really are. One of the reasons we're for transfer programs within the technical colleges is because employers, as well as for the enrichment of lives and citizens, everyone says we need all of the above. You don't just need automatons to do a job. You need good citizens who are well educated throughout. So that's why actually I think that there is some mission drift, is that more communities and employers and individuals for their own families want a broad education, whether it's at the 2-year level so-called training or at whatever level. So that is our vision, is to make sure people are broadly educated, not just trained. Not that there's anything wrong with training, but we certainly are aware that resources, as this list shows, we can get it's a lot easier to get matching funds from the private sector for equipment and for programs for what they call high demand fields. And that's a good thing. But it's our responsibility, and I think the board takes it seriously, and the executives, and we do, that when our students get those educations, that they're exposed broadly to the concepts that will help them be leaders in their professions and citizens and live full lives.
So what do you plan to do to compensate for the erosion of funds for liberal arts education in itself? Because as you say, $8 million, that's for professional school or vocational training. Like speech pathology was suppressed for good or bad reason at this institution in 1990, if I'm not mistaken. Now it's back, which is maybe fine, but what about liberal, the College of Arts and Science, especially arts, which have no private funding practically?
Well, I'll just conclude by saying I do not accept the premise that the increase of investment in technical training causes the erosion in investment in the liberal arts. We advocate for all. We do not say that one is more important than others. And I think that legislators that I've spoken with, and certainly the board of regents, well understands, they can speak for themselves, that that the liberal arts are very important. Right, Jerry? You've never gotten any sense to the contrary from those of us that you visit with about this. It's a point well made, and there are values across the country that would suggest that with 2% unemployment, that maybe all of the resources are going to the technical fields. But I think our board tries to balance that.
My name's Curtis Noonan, that's C-U-R-T-I-S, Noonan, N-O-O-N-A-N, and I'm on faculty with the College of Health Professions and Biomedical Sciences. And I'm also a member of the Sustainable Campus Committee, and our committee met yesterday and they asked me to bring to you a request. But first, just a very brief bit of context. Back in 2002, President Dennison, in a very forward-thinking move, signed on to an international declaration that committed our campus to the principles of sustainability. And he formed the Sustainable Campus Committee, which is composed of faculty, staff, administrators, and students. And that committee is charged with promoting and fostering sustainable practices on campus, which is together with other entities on campus, such as food services, transportation, facility services, recycling, a lot of programs on campus that are working towards sustainability. More recently, in February of 2007, President Dennison, again on the cutting edge, signed what's called the American College and University President's Climate Commitment, which is a very concrete and comprehensive timeline for getting our campus to meet the goals of carbon and climate neutrality. Excuse me. So now my request to you, as recently as last week, the bill was introduced on the House floor, H.R. 3637, and it's called Higher Education Sustainability Act of 2007. The goal is to have $50 million in new grant funding for higher education institutions to promote and engage in some of these activities that we will need to engage in order to meet some of our sustainable goals. I think President Dennison and all the other entities on campus that have been working towards sustainability have put ourselves in a good position to compete effectively for these funds. And so my request to you, and we'll also make the same request to President Dennison, is to send a letter of support to our congressional representatives in support of this bill, and I'll leave some information with you for that.
Curtis, we would be glad to do that. I think my traveling companion could tell you this morning as we rode, I was online as he drove and was looking at a website about University of Minnesota Morris. And I'm sure if you're deep into this subject, they're one of the award-winning sustainable campuses in the country, and I was just hugely impressed and forwarded it to several people. because I'm always noodling around looking for campuses. Western here, Western has, we were at a dedication for their biomass facility that helps heat part of their campus, and the things in Montana that I'm sure you're more aware of than I am. But I was not aware of the bill that you just talked about. And we would be more than happy to craft that letter on behalf of the Board of Regents and send it to, and support however we could. And we're very proud to hear that President Dennison is cutting edge. Some people thought he was getting kind of old.
Hi, I'm Meg Tracy, and I'm with the Rural Institute on Disabilities, and I direct a program in the state to improve the health of people with disabilities. And I just want to recognize the effort the university system has made to increase the accessibility of campuses for students with disabilities, and encourage you in those regards. I also just came from a legislative planning session with the disability community on Monday, and we have a white paper that may be of interest and you may be aware of, but just to encourage the university system to work with the disability community on increasing the professionalism of direct service staff in the state and personal care attendants, which is a critical component in our communities to keep people with disabilities and people as they age living in their communities. And it's just a real growth opportunity, I think, for the state. And I guess along those lines, too, I would encourage the university system to look at curriculum of all professions that are engaged in building our communities and make sure they're prepared to think about it from a universal design perspective, so that when we're out doing rural economic development, we're thinking about it within the universal design framework. So I can send the white paper if that's of interest to the group.
Please do, and thank you for the work that you do.
Hi, welcome to the University Center. My name is Candy Holt, and that's with a C and a Y and H-O-L-T. I want to echo Mark's remarks about just the retention and recruitment of quality staff to the University of Montana, and really throughout the university system. I think if we're going to continue to deliver the services that our students are asking for, we need to do that. And I don't want to repeat what Mark said, but I want to touch on something that you talked about, and that is graduating folks with graduate degrees in the state and then keeping them here. In the University Center, we have several opportunities where I could create graduate assistantships. Unfortunately, to pay the rate that I'm expected to do by the grad school, I would actually be paying those students working on a master's degree more than the staff that I have who have master's degrees. So it's a real challenge to go out and recruit people with a master's degree who want to stay here, because I can point to my colleagues in the Northwest who are paying an average of $10,000 more a year for program advisors, all of whom we expect to have master's degrees. So as we encourage graduate education, I think we really need to look at what we're paying our own staff when we ask them to have graduate degrees. Thank you.
Can you hear me? All right. My name is Sally Peterson, and I am representing the College of Education as a graduate research assistant. And there's a colleague of mine, June, came along. This is so appropriate to the discipline, the class we are taking now is college and university administration. We became more interested as the course developed, and I thought, oh, we're going. And in the articles that we read, it keeps surfacing models of efficiency, use of money, and Colorado came up as a 10-year plan. I thought that was rather innovative, where they really give institutions a lot of leeway with their funding, with also defined accountability measures. So it's used to match the goals, but then you don't have to keep reinventing the process. It's there and it's intact. So there are some models, and we'd be happy to do some in-depth research on some of the better models that are really working to save money for the state. And along with that, we'd also like to see our staff paid well. June and I got in a little dialogue a little bit, as graduates do, about how we measure benefit. And it's much easier to measure it with a quantitative analysis of buildings and programs and I suppose grants. I don't want to go down the line items. But there's a measure of human benefit, and I see this university and other universities doing that by communicating with an outreach. And I'd like to see that extended every single direction. One of my little brainchilds was, would it be possible for our college, which isn't quite funded the way, say, business is? Business has earned it. They've been active with corporate, the corporate world to partnership, and we'd like to do more of that. But could there be somewhat of an exchange? We will trade some of your resources and we will help you with our resources. I would like to see collegiality between different colleges more than competition. So that's just an idea, because education would like to be part of the solution to a greater extent, not just complaining about low wages, but let's have some of the graduates maybe be on some committees to see what we can come up with as far as maximizing that dollar, avoiding duplication. But perhaps taking a few more colleges in business education would benefit. A few more business classes might benefit from some of our education programs. And that would develop the collegiality and communication. The vision's out there, the dialogue's out there, and I thank you for coming and hearing our voice. It means a lot.
My name's Renee Bentham. It's ReneeBentham. I'm with Missoula County Public Schools Adult Basic Education. And in terms of access and affordability for students, I'd really encourage you to work with OPI, ABE. We have a place to help students prepare for college so that they'll stay. And there are models around the nation for doing that.
Thank you, Renee. We are looking to do more. I have a better understanding of that. We'll follow up.
Hi, my name is Ray Carlisle. It's spelled C-A-R-L-I-S-L-E. I was going to say it's spelled T-R-O-U-B-L-E. There are 27 federal TRIO programs in the state of Montana, and all of us share the common mission of making higher ed accessible to low-income and first-generation students. And from the time that program started on our campus here, I've been director for 27 years, we had an open admissions policy. In the intervening years, we've implemented admission standards and we've reorganized the system, and now we have different paths for different students. But at your November meeting, you're going to consider a change that would really affect the admissibility of a lot of the low-income first-generation students that we've been able to serve here. I'm not sure what our TRIO statewide association will have in the way of feedback. It may not be a bad thing. Maybe we have enough programs in place at two-year schools to offer a better path for students. Let me just suggest at this point, as you consider and talk about the change that would tighten up admissions at UM-Missoula and MSU Bozeman, that you think in terms of a better opportunity for students as opposed to a new barrier or a new block in the path to higher education. And probably the most important thing is that we take a real serious look at what resources are available at the two-year schools or wherever students will enroll to make sure that they're welcome there, that they get the message that they're valued in higher education, and that we don't lessen the chance that they'll complete four-year degrees. A four-year degree isn't for everybody in higher education, but we don't want to make it less accessible than it is now to students. So if you could think about those things, we'll no doubt have some feedback for you before the November meeting. Thanks.
Ray, if I could Can you hear me now? Ray, thank you. Ray was at a talk I gave last Friday on academic advising, and I was looking at my notes the next, a few days later, and it said, someone had given me some advice, if you don't talk about anything else, talk about the wonderful work that the TRIO programs do in advising. I went back and looked at the talk that I gave, and I hadn't mentioned the TRIO programs at all. And so I apologize because I had meant to put them right at the top, programs like Upward Bound and the other ones that you've been working at for 27 years, and they do make a huge difference. We hear what you're saying. It's an important part of the conversation. I will say that we are pretty confident in the services and facilities of the 2-year units more than ever before, certainly more than in the years when you began. But you made a number of good points, and we will continue to listen.
I would comment on that. Two things that I think you said that I think there's strong support on the board. Clearly, no one on the board is advocating turning anyone away, and I think that is access and affordability is our number one goal, and I strongly believe that it will stay there, and that's where it is in most, if not all, 7 of the members. So I think that will stay in the forefront. And along with that, in terms of retention and achieving those degrees, is I think we're looking more at a pathway, is what is the best route to get to that end result. But I think we're on the exact same page with what you're saying, and we would look for input at the November meeting. It clearly is a decision that's out there, and direction, I think we're all looking at what is the best way to go. But the discussion in front of us hasn't been to limit it. It's been more to try to shape it to where our success rate rises, not falls.
Time for about one more.
Just make one additional point. I'm afraid in a nutshell, what I'm thinking is that the university is for excellence. The 2-year post-secondary system is for opportunity. And maybe that's something that we can think about, that the 2-year system opens up to everyone, but the university system, on the other hand, does have to keep its eye on excellence. And for graduate programs, upper division programs, and so forth.
Thank you, Dave. Anything, last chance at us? Victoria, quick comment.
I can speak pretty loudly too. I'm Victoria Clark, CLARK, and in looking over your goals, which I think it's really fantastic to see them kind of spread out, to see that this is what you're targeting. And in thinking about some of the comments that I heard right in this last hour, and I was at the earlier session this morning, particularly with, was it Professor Valentine? Was that when I look at your goals, one thing that you maybe could do is you have access and affordability, and then you say economic development. Maybe if you broaden that to say socioeconomic development, and that way you would capture not just that education is a individual good and an economic good, but frankly it's a public good. And that's in fact why the government is in the business of education, is because it's not so much even economically driven, but it's because we want good citizens and we want people that can participate in our system of governance. And so if you broaden that goal to be socioeconomic, I think you would be able to capture something like he was saying, and anyone that had fears that it was maybe becoming too economically bent, that then you show that you're presenting the face that it's really about the community, the state as a community, and it's a socioeconomic goal or target. So that was just a comment I had.
Okay. Thank you all very, very much for coming. This was a great turnout. And if you have, several of you mentioned you had white papers or backup, by all means share those with us. Someone's been taking copious notes as you spoke, and we will follow up with many of the themes that we've heard from you. They're heartfelt and they're important, and we thank you very, very much for participating.